So welcome back to another classic video, and today I just thought I would make a quick review of FBC Firebreak and give you a little look at this game from what I've played briefly from the beta access and give you an early review because, simply enough, I just want to state that no one is talking about this game. So in this FBC Firebreak review, I just want to highlight why you should be interested in this game. And first things first, okay, this is from Remedy, okay, and if you don't know who they are, they've made some classic, bangers, like AAA amazing games, like Alan Wake 2, Control. So it's kind of surprising to me that literally no one is talking about this game, and I think I know why, okay? Most gamers, and myself included, I think I can speak for most of us, we're pretty fed up with this kind of multiplayer, kind of cash grab. That's what it looks to be, a class-based shooter where you play, in a team.
Oh no, not again.
And basically, this is Control's version of Darktide, okay? Almost Left 4 Dead, that kind of game. And I think a lot of people are just tired of that genre. But to be honest, it isn't the most innovative game, and Remedy are known for their innovation, but I do think that Remedy have added enough to this genre to make it exciting, and the reason I just want to highlight it today is because you can actually play this on Game Pass, and I don't usually like to showcase, like Game Pass as a service because yeah, it does have its benefits, but also, when you say that this is on Game Pass, it always comes with like annotation. When you say something's on Game Pass, it makes it sound like it's not good enough for, a full release, that, it's only good because you can play it on Game Pass, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that perhaps people will actually give this game a chance simply because it is on Game Pass, and otherwise I just don't think anyone cares about this. No one's talking about it, which is a huge shame because Control is such a thought-provoking and just incredible experience, and this is set in exactly the same universe, exactly in the same area as well. This is 6 years later, and you're going back in to basically clean out the area of all of these kind of supernatural enemies and stuff like that. Basically, you have different tasks to complete, different missions to complete, and you work as a team to complete those missions. It's not, PvP or anything like that. You're not fighting each other. You are completing objectives, taking down bosses, and all of that good stuff, okay? Now, before we get into this FBC Firebreak review, I do simply ask that you subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, it would mean a lot to me. Become a wise one today if you love analyzing video games, looking at media objectively and fairly, and philosophical videos. I blend both gaming and philosophy on this channel, so subscribe to the channel as we do deeper dives on gaming and all of that good stuff. It would mean a lot to me if you do subscribe, and consider checking out my music on Spotify. Now, with that shilling out of the way, let's get on with the video. And what you need to know is basically there are 5 missions right now on release, but I do believe they are adding more at the end of the year. It is very much kind of that extraction objective-based gameplay. That's why I am comparing it to something like 40k Darktide, where basically you have to clear out hordes of enemies, you're sent in there to get something or to protect something, and then take out a boss, something like that. It's going to depend, of course, on the mission, and there are variations to the missions. And basically, you work as a team, class-based gameplay. We've seen it before, like I said, but it does have that Remedy touch. So basically, for example, one of you could be playing, the support class, boosting your allies, giving them extra health. One of you actually has like this water gun that soaks the enemies, and this is quite useful because this game does have elemental systems in it, okay? Not just objective-based gameplay. So basically, if you are dealing with, an enemy that spits a bunch of fire at you, or for example, you deal with these supernatural enemies that basically can make themselves out of anything. They can manifest, through any object, basically, like, paper notes. And it just swarms all over you, so you can't see what the hell you're doing. Stuff like that, that's where you've actually got to play as a team, soak these enemies and then zap them with the electricity or put out the fire, stuff like that. So, it's playing with the elemental ideas, which I really like. but you actually have to communicate as a team. You don't have this all yourself. You work together. And yes, that is the basis of a class-based shooter, but most class-based shooters don't actually utilize that co-op gameplay that much. You can basically still get through it as a one-man army. Here, you do actually have to work as a team, which I really like. And let's quickly talk about the gunplay, because of course that is important. And bear in mind, from what I've played, it's only the beta, early access stuff, so they might have patched it at this point, but I do think it is still worth talking about, because literally no one is, and I hope this helps some people get interested or at least try it out, because I do think that this is better compared to most cooperative. I do think this is much better compared to most class-based co-op games, even if it does at times kind of play it safe, I would say. But basically, if you've played Control, you will know how satisfying that gameplay is and the shooting in that. This feels exactly one-to-one like Control does, but with a camera perspective of first-person, shooter, because they aren't known for, their first-person shooter games. Obviously, they don't really do that. They aren't even known for good FPS. Even Alan Wake shooting in that game sometimes feels a bit floaty. But Control had that, visceral impact where you kind of pop an enemy's head, and them being like these kind of supernatural beings from another dimension. It kind of have that wispy effect, which I really like, and it basically plays like that. It feels exactly like it did in Control. I do like the fact that in the game modes, they are time pressured, so it does add that element of, like urgency as well. Things get difficult the longer you stay there. Also, there are random things that can happen, mini bosses and stuff like that you have to watch out for. And it is actually quite a difficult game if you aren't working together. There are some game modes in FBC Firebreak that seem a little bit out there, a little bit weird. For example, there's one of them where you have to go in and clear up. Basically, you are Charlie. You're basically a glorified janitor.
Oh shit, buddy, I gotta dig a little deeper. There's no Pepe Silvia, you gotta be kidding me! I got boxes full of Pepe!
Basically, it's your job to go in there and clear up all of these, sticky notes, and basically to cleanse the area from supernatural threats and stuff like that. But, at times, that's, and to me, that's not the most interesting thing, to be honest, just shooting at, like something that you gotta destroy, and then just waiting for a wave of enemies and stuff like that. Even Dark Tide, which I think is one of the best co-op, multiplayer, objective-based, class-based games out there, that also does a similar thing where you just have to go and, basically destroy a bunch of stuff and then extract, although that does have different game modes built into it as well. But honestly, I do think that it does have potential if they add more, into it. On paper, yes, it does look a little bit generic, a little bit simplistic. It has, those quick time events that I'm not a big fan of. Some mini games like when you're disarming a bomb or protecting something, and pretty standard, objective-based stuff. I do think it would have been better if they leaned more into the unique atmosphere of Control and played with some more, kind of horror. You do see returning enemies, so for fans of Control, this is, like a super cool experience, because you just go back to the, same place that you love. You go back, you fight enemies that you did in Control. Everything is even more detailed because it's in first person, and the art style, Remedy and their art style has always been on peak, okay? It's peak, okay? And here it's very peak as well. I just love, the lighting. I love the enemy designs. I just love the idea of, going into like a secret government facility and, it playing around with all of these different, kind of leaks from other dimensions and stuff like that. It's just super cool, and I just think that they've nailed the aesthetic here. But the game modes themselves are a little bit basic. Shooting doesn't always feel, as good as other first-person shooters. It does still feel very much like Control did, but zoomed in. And the objectives themselves are interesting, and I love how much you have to communicate with your team here compared to other games. And also, of course, there's progression here, leveling up your weapons, playing the different classes, and, they all have their own abilities and strengths and weaknesses, like I said, and they all kind of play off of each other. But like I said, I'll have to play the full version to truly find out more about individual classes. But that is my FBC Firebreak review based on the early access stuff. I just thought I would cover it because no one's talking about this, and I do think that, you know, this does deserve your attention because it's not like other co-op based, you know, games. I do think they are trying to do something different here. Remedy always does think outside the box. I just hope with their game modes it's enough, and only time will tell as they add more content to it. But there you go, that is my quick FBC Firebreak review. I do hope you enjoyed this one. So thank you for watching my returning wise ones, and for any new viewers, I do hope you consider subscribing if you like this type of content, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Peace out.